Hi, my name's Laura, and today I'll be presenting to you my Teacher as a Research Project final report in regards to the question, what happens to children's engagement if I include mindful techniques into a preschool program? This report is going to include an introduction. I will share with you a little bit about the method that I'm using. I will share with you the findings table, my actual findings, discussion, and the conclusion of how the report went. So when I talk about the introduction, I think it's important to talk about sort of the areas that I was focusing on and the presentation areas that's going to be there. The question obviously being what happens to mindful children's engagement when I implement mindfulness techniques, and what did I actually do? I think it was really important for me to actually have some sort of personal connection with the question that I was asking. I've always been involved in mindful techniques myself, but never had actually implemented it within an early years service. I also never really had much knowledge about mindfulness techniques and why it is that they're important amongst children and adults of all ages. And I think that the research behind whether they do or don't work is something that I wasn't aware of either. So when I chose this question, I think it was important for me to be able to use this in my everyday life and use my findings as something and some evidence that I can have moving forward. So when we talk about the method, we say where was it going to happen? So the research took place within the 3- and 4-year-old kindergarten setting within my own service. I think that I was really intrigued to do it within my own service because I knew that the other preschool teachers and the other preschool educators were also wanting to find some answers and to learn a little bit about mindfulness techniques themselves. So I knew that this would definitely be a support of them also. It was carried over the course of about 2 weeks when I would come in and implement mindfulness for up to 10 to 15 minutes per day in a range of times. So sometimes it would be in a set environment where it's a group time. We're sitting down for 10 minutes to implement the techniques. In other times, it was just randomly throughout the day. If children were finding that they were ever needing some support self-regulating, that we would be able to sit together and use some of the breathing techniques or the brain gym techniques, which I'll be speaking about quite soon. Which I've just shared a little bit about is implementing the mindfulness techniques. So the research included myself, it included a group of 15 children from the preschool room, and I also offered to some inclusion for the families and the teachers as well to be a part of the research project and to be able to implement these techniques. The two strategies that I chose are strategies that I'm quite familiar with. I didn't feel that it was going to be beneficial to try and learn a new strategy and then implement it without having some sort of experience with it myself previously. So the first strategy that I implemented was a brain gym strategy. Brain gym is something that I have been utilizing within our early years services for quite some time and something that I was trained on about 3 or 4 years ago. So what brain gym is, it's a range of different movements that one person can make, such as a figure 8 or climbing a spider, that actually connect your left side to your right side of your brain. Once this is happening, then children are able to be a little bit more engaged, and it can help really support that self-regulation and I guess any emotional challenges that children are dealing with. I also chose mindfulness meditation. So again, something that I'm quite familiar with and have some experience with also. So mindfulness meditation, I think mainly what I was looking for were just some simple breathing techniques that I was able to implement with the children and talk about the importance of those and how they can be beneficial. As you'll see here, I have my findings table. I did find it a little bit challenging to find some really core research on brain gym as a mindfulness technique, but definitely I could find a lot of sort of information about mindfulness meditation. When you have a look at the effects of implementing mindfulness with children, there is some research around the increase of connectivity within the frontal lobe that supports that extra concentration. The definition of mindfulness is maintaining awareness of your thoughts, movements, and emotions. Something we'll touch on within the next slide is that a little bit more around that definition. When you'll see here the effects of participating in MBSR. So what MBSR is, mindfulness-based stress reduction. So this is something that I come up and saw a lot throughout my findings and throughout my research. And it's a technique that's used widely with a lot of adults, but just not yet. It doesn't really have that core research of how it does support children, and then the types of mindfulness techniques. So blowing bubbles with those breathing exercises, and who that's been recommended by. So my findings, so again, we're talking about this MBSR. So the technique was implemented with mindfulness meditation, so primarily focusing on breathing aspects. What I found these techniques and the research that I found is there's actually services that you can go to where you're able to implement these techniques. The definition of mindfulness, I think that I found a range of different definitions, and I spoke to a few children and families about what their definition was, and some of them that said to be happy or to be able to concentrate. And I think that I resonated when I thought about mindfulness. I think about to be centered and to be able to sort of self-regulate your feelings and emotions throughout the day. So when I think about the discussion, sort of what happens, so over the course of 2 weeks, I implemented the brain gym movements into a structured 15-minute group session. And then I also implemented the sort of randomized techniques throughout the day whenever I saw that children were needing some support with their self-regulation and their emotional needs. I really did find that when I was implementing the brain gym techniques within the morning, when I was engaging children within intentional teaching experiences during the day, their participation did increase, and I felt definitely that their engagement had increased as well. I'd utilized a sticker chart for children and wanting them to sort of rate whether they wanted to participate or not in an experience after we did the brain gym techniques, and I found that there was quite over 50% of children were saying verbally and showing on the sticker chart that they wanted to be a part of the intentional teaching experience after sitting down first as a group and working on those mindfulness techniques such as brain gym and such as some breathing techniques as well. And actually over 75% of the children verbally expressed that they felt increase in productivity. Some of the comments saying, I wanted to learn, I wanted to do that activity, I like doing brain gym before we do some learning. So I think for me, that report from the child or from the children was going to be the most critical in comparison to sort of other reflections. And so when I think about the other reflections or the other versions of report, I also had reports from the teachers that stated they saw a massive increase in productivity and engagement after the children were engaging in the mindfulness techniques, including especially brain gym, and that families as well had said that they'd seen an increase in productivity. Even at home, sometimes children were taking the techniques home with them before they were maybe reading a story with their families. They would say, oh, we're going to do our brain gym first and, work on some of the techniques that they had there. In conclusion, I really feel like that my research, it really supported the question in that will it increase productivity? Will it increase engagement? And I feel like it really did. I know I can see that it really did, especially with those verbal responses from 75% of those children. And it has supported my previous findings in that children do benefit from mindfulness techniques, and it can support their overall engagement throughout the day. Something that I did have to think about is when I was critically reflecting, I wondered if maybe the intentional teaching experiences was just something that was a little bit more catered to the children's interest. And so I think that it would be beneficial if I was to do the research again. It would be over a longer period of time in a more set and controlled environment rather than a progressive curriculum, maybe working with a set curriculum and trialing it in 2 different ways there. I feel that my research has definitely benefited my understanding of mindfulness with children. I've been able to share lots of this information with the families and with my fellow colleagues who are now been implementing it within their services and their settings, and are finding a really really great form of engagement with the children since doing so. Thanks.